Anishinaabe Nation, which represents 49 First Nations in Northern Ontario, said in a press release that the report shows how the Thunder Bay Police Service's leadership, quote, continues to refuse to accept responsibility for its failures and shows no signs of changing. Nan says inadequate investigations, mishandling of cases, and failure to address urgent issues are not a result of being underfunded. They are a result of a failure of leadership. According to Nan, without leadership expecting responsibility, it's impossible to expect that serious issues such as systemic racism can even begin to be addressed. A special meeting of the Thunder Bay Police Services Board is underway at this hour. Here to talk about the findings of the Thunder Bay panel is our Truth and Politics panel. Kerry Benjoe is a journalist and editor of the Eagle Feather News, and Niigaan Sinclair is a columnist at the Winnipeg Free Press and a professor at the University of Manitoba. Kerry, Niigaan, thanks for being with us. Kerry, let's start with you. There's been a lot of focus on the Thunder Bay Police and anti-Indigenous racism there for many years now. What does this report do to address the situation?
Excuse me. Reading through the report, I didn't have much time to read it, but it was really triggering to just know the amount of, just to understand a bit of the experience of the Indigenous people in Thunder Bay. And I do think that this report is addressing some of those concerns. Some very meaningful changes are being proposed. Whether or not those do happen remain to be seen. Like with all reports, there's always, the wording is always good, but it's the action that matters.
Niigaan, same to you. Do you think that this report will help address the situation there?
Well, I mean, to be transparent, my father has previously investigated the Thunder Bay Police and offered his own set of recommendations. So this is long-standing. It's certainly been systemic for quite a long time in Thunder Bay, involving the atrociously bad relationship between the institution of policing, but particularly the justice system overall, and Indigenous peoples, massive over-incarceration, over-policing, under-resourced ways Indigenous peoples interact with the system. What this report does is it yet again proves that not only are Indigenous peoples suffering from systemic oppression and racism within the Thunder Bay policing, but then also within the Thunder Bay policing, there is deep, deep, deep issues that continue to permeate and infect that police force. And while I'm encouraged by some of the recent hires that take place within Thunder Bay, it's a cautious optimism, because for the most part, this is not about bringing in one person or two people. This is about realizing that there are ways in which the Thunder Bay police officers have resulted in the deaths of people, the ongoing oppression and over-incarceration of peoples. And it's not changing. It's happening still today. And it's happening, by this report, seems to be even more so going into the future. So without the implementation of the calls within this report and others, it certainly will not change in the near future, and it won't change without wide-scale integration and commitment from all levels of policing in Thunder Bay.
Kerry, one big change that is coming soon, and that's a new chief of police there. A Métis person will be heading up the police force. Do you think that could help the situation?
Any type of change where you're bringing in Indigenous people and their experience, it will have somewhat of an impact, but all the responsibility shouldn't be shouldered on one person. He is only one person, and he is only able to do so much. Like Niigaan said, it's system-wide. The changes have to come from all areas. And yes, that's a good start. It's a good start that he's there and he can bring his experience and his knowledge to the job, but once again, he's just one person.
Niigaan, as you point out, your father wrote a report here. This report makes mention of 550 previous recommendations that have had no meaningful implementation. How hopeful do you think the Indigenous community of Thunder Bay should be that any of these will be implemented?
Yeah, and before we start wagging our finger at Thunder Bay, I think we got to remember that these kinds of reports and inquiries have been happening all the way since the Aboriginal Justice Inquiry in Manitoba, 1988 to 1990, and the hundreds of recommendations from that report have been collecting dust on the shelf now for 3 decades. So before we wag any fingers, I think the key is to understand that there is a real problem within the country itself when it comes to changing justice. But one thing that is really, I think, key with this report, and I encourage everyone out there to read it, the one thing that's really key to understand is that the problem is really in the ways in which we approach the issue. We approach justice as if the only issue of justice is when people enter into the justice system, whereas the fundamental flaw is that the justice system is a reactive system. It's not an Indigenous-led way, which would be proactive. You know, we would never have policing that's only job is to find those who perpetrate crimes. We would also have a justice system that is fully integrated in making sure that the community is well cared for, feels safe, and that has healthy relationships within it. The police are only one part of that, but they might be the most important part when it comes to the issue of trauma. And trauma is something that is endemic within our communities, and that therefore police officers are completely incapable of handling what Indigenous trauma looks like, which is full of colonialism and policy, and understanding fundamentally that you can't just go in guns a-blazing when it comes to situations involving Indigenous peoples. You have to show extra care, extra kindness, extra sensitivity, and that way may lead you to a much better outcome. And I think that this report points to that as well as many others.
Kerry, Niigaan, we'll have to leave it there, but thanks as always for joining us this week.
Miigwech, thanks.